In media, characters are the bread and butter of telling a story. After all, nothing gets us invested in a universe quite like relatable and compelling characters. Some, however, just weren't meant to be seen. I'm Cy for WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 hidden video game characters you weren't supposed to see. Number 10. Calendar Man, Batman Arkham Knight. Batman has some of the best villains in all of comic books, period. He also has some downright nutty stuff. Props go to the Arkham games for actually giving Calendar Man, the killer who only strikes on holidays, some interesting depth. This little Easter egg actually ties two games in a franchise together, so it really shows that developers Rocksteady were looking to make a secret that would be followed and noticed by only the most dedicated. In Batman Arkham City, the player can visit Calendar Man in a cell. On certain dates, the character regales Batman with tales of crimes he's committed on holidays past, but there's an extra message tucked away for those who think outside the box. On December 13th, the anniversary of Rocksteady's founding, Calendar Man tells Batman, "I was there at your beginning and I will be there at your end." Spooky, but also not totally meaningless. 4 years later, in the fourth game in the series, Batman Arkham Knight, the story concludes with the Nightfall Protocol, essentially the complete destruction of Batman as a superhero. It's a blink and you'll miss it cameo, the kind of thing you'll only see if you were told to look for it in a previous game, but the back of Calendar Man's head can be seen in the crowd outside Wayne Manor on this red letter day for Batman's adversaries. Number 9. Master Hand, Super Smash Bros. Melee. This one is a bit of a misnomer. You are supposed to see Master Hand in Super Smash Bros. Melee, but only in the circumstances the game has specifically built for him. That is to say, Master Hand is one of the potential end bosses for the game's adventure mode, a climactic face-off between your selected Nintendo mascot and some sort of omnipotent glove. For a long time, the possibility of playing as Master Hand was discussed and shot down, and it took years for the truth to be finally revealed. With some controller trickery and pokery, it is possible to glitch Master Hand into the hands of players. Never intended to be playable, Master Hand cannot be moved by the analog stick, but inputs on the controller can make the character perform actions to get him around whatever stage players see fit. And it's not just the standard melee mode either. Master Hand is playable in several other game types such as the event matches and the home run contest. Although the character will always spawn with an over-the-top introduction animation, so you'd be lucky to get little more than a slap in against the very fortunate sandbag before the timer runs out. Number 8. Ethan Winters, Resident Evil Village. Resident Evil 7 was a refresh for Capcom's horror series, bringing it back to its creepy roots and shifting the playstyle to first person to better put us in the shoes of regular Joe Schmo, Ethan Winters. As video game fans are wont to do, some couldn't resist the urge to take a peek at what Ethan looked like from some different perspectives. Not so shockingly, they found that most of the game Ethan wanders around the Baker plantation without a head on his body, but there are some scenes where this isn't the case. When controlling secondary character Mia, it's possible to get a look at Ethan's face as he lies prone in some water, modelled on his actor Todd Soley. Resident Evil Village pushed a little more towards showing Ethan's face as part of its story, but never quite got there. That being said, immediately after release, some keen fans noticed something in the game's epilogue. Just before the game cuts to black and the credits roll, as Rose Winters is driven down a long road away from the cemetery, if you squint you can see a figure by the roadside. More camera trickery sees Ethan, face and all, standing there chillingly still. At this point, we don't know if this is a case of leaving Ethan's model on the map accidentally or intentionally placing him there to creep out fans. Number 7. TUROK, WWF Warzone. Over the years, wrestling games have featured numerous bizarre cameos and guest spots, from Colonel Saunders to Fred Durst. If you avoided the bug-ridden hellscape that was WWE 2K20, and why wouldn't you, you probably didn't see Ribby the Rib, and you're all the better for it. Iguana West, an offshoot of Iguana Entertainment, got the license to develop several WWE games during the company's heyday, such as WWF Attitude and WWF Warzone. The latter of these has a guest character who isn't quite unlockable but remains lurking in the game's files, TUROK the Dinosaur Hunter. Iguana Entertainment were the masterminds behind the TUROK franchise, which is exactly how this came to be. How it came to not be is still anyone's guess, but it's likely that the WWE put the kibosh on this one themselves. Number 6. Mel, Portal 2. The original Portal was a brilliant blend of innovative puzzle solving with great writing and voice performance. A sequel seemed like a surefire thing, but how could you possibly continue a story that ended so perfectly? Originally, Portal 2 was going to let Shell live a presumably peaceful life after the events of the first game, and instead was going to pick things up with a new protagonist. Through concept art, we are introduced to Mel, likely to have just as much dialogue as her predecessor, that is, Zero. She would have just been another player avatar. However, Portal 2 needed more than just any old player avatar, it needed Shell specifically. The writers for the game found that without her usual foil, GLaDOS just wasn't as fun. The dynamic that she and the player had formed in the original Portal was via Shell, and there was to be no "oh, it's you" moment without her. Mel was then relegated to being the Player 2 character for the game's co-op mode, but then hit the cutting room floor completely when Peabody and Atlas were designed. Essentially, it made more sense to use robots for these tests who could die over and over and respawn without needing to justify how Shell and Mel were apparently suddenly invincible. Number 5. VAMP, Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty. Metal Gear Solid and background secrets go together like infiltration and cardboard boxes. In Sons of Liberty, we are introduced to VAMP, one of the members of the villainous Dead Cell. His particular gimmick was immortality, which is a pretty neat trick to have on your side. Because of this, it was difficult to suspend our disbelief too much that the boss fight against him actually resulted in the character meeting its untimely end, especially considering that VAMP had been shot in the head numerous times already, of course. VAMP returned 5 years later during the events of Metal Gear Solid 4, Guns of the Patriots, to have another showdown with Snake. Insanely eagle-eyed players may have seen this coming, however, if they paid very, very close attention to the final cutscene of Metal Gear Solid 2. As Snake and Raiden stand outside Federal Hall and wax lyrical about philosophy and politics, it is a Metal Gear title after all, VAMP can actually be spotted in the crowd around them at multiple points, albeit for just a few milliseconds. But that could be any handsome devil in a big brown duster, right? Well, thanks to fan-hacked camera tricks, we know that it is indeed VAMP, proving that he was still alive and would be returning in the future. Number 4. T-Rex, Need for Speed 2. In the time before unlockables, entering in a cheat code always felt like you were actually, well, cheating, hence the name. It was like being Indiana Jones, grabbing something elusive you perhaps weren't supposed to see. Need for Speed 2, released for PS1 and PC in 1997, features plenty of cars to pick from to race around in, but if you want to mix it up, the game's bevy of cheat codes have some wonderfully weird things to choose from. Fancy flying around courses as a UFO? Or perhaps as one of the game's many props, such as wagons or typically inanimate boxes. The best of all of these is the T-Rex. Pair it with the similar cheat that turns all of the in-game traffic into dinosaurs and you're in for a hilariously unique time. Whilst you take control of the T-Rex, it's best described perhaps as driving it rather than playing as it as though it were a sentient being. The very well-trained king of the dinosaurs stays very still as you careen around corners on what we can only assume are wheels underneath its feet. Sadly, if you lose a race, there's no option to eat your competition out of malice. Number 3. Link, Golden Sun, The Lost Age. Perhaps some of the most underrated JRPGs of all time, the Golden Sun series was developed by Camelot Software for the Game Boy Advance and, after a lengthy wait, Nintendo DS. The second title, Golden Sun The Lost Age, takes place immediately after the first and actually puts the player in the shoes of somewhat antagonist and somewhat anti-hero Felix, who had been a major part of the first game's story. Felix and his allies fight their way through monsters, unlock spells, and become embroiled in a story full of magic and ruination. Though there's one possible playable character who never shows up in the game, presumably because the lands of Weyard and Hyrule have quite some distance between them. Lurking in the data for Golden Sun The Lost Age still exists an entire set of sprites for The Legend of Zelda's own hero Link. With some simple swapping around of assets, these sprites can be dropped in over Felix's, and players who emulate the game can play through the entire story as the hero of time. Number 2. Dante, Devil May Cry 4. Devil May Cry 4 brought some excellent advancements to the gameplay and the story of the series by introducing us to new playable character Nero. Now, I'm by no means saying that Dante's appearance in the game is some kind of wild mistake. Not only is he a huge part of why Nero gets introduced to the DMC universe, but he's also one of the game's playable characters. However, there is a particular moment Dante shows up in that most players don't realise. During the game's introduction, we have a montage of Nero fighting off some demons, and in a particular shot, if you slow the footage right down or pause it on just the right frame, you can see Dante watching Nero strut his stuff. This implies that Dante knew about Nero before encountering him face to face, and specifically knows about his demon arm in advance. It probably explains why he acts so nonchalantly about it when the two face off in the game's opening. Creepy Uncle Dante is looking out for you, Nero, whether players realise it or not. Either that or he's there to rank your style with scorecards, so make sure you're not using the same combo over and over again, huh? Number 1. James Sunderland, Silent Hill 3. The fact that this is far and away the creepiest entry on this list is appropriate considering Silent Hill's penchant for making gamers terrified and uncomfortable. Silent Hill 3 did this expertly from the off. The title introduces players to new hero Heather Mason, the daughter of the first game's protagonist Harry. After experiencing some visions, she races home and both Heather and the player are aghast to discover Harry's dead body in an armchair at their home. Ah, but is it Harry? Well, for storyline purposes, yes, it is, but considering we never get a good look at the body, it's not surprising that some die-hard fans broke the camera out of position for a better look. After all, we want to see what Harry looks like in PS2 graphics rather than his original PS1 appearance. Except, getting that closer look reveals that Team Silent didn't make a new Harry model and instead just used Silent Hill 2 protagonist James Sunderland instead. James Sunderland also appears in the game's super secret UFO ending, but most people don't know that he was lurking in Harry's chair all this time. And that's the list. Let us know what you thought of this video down in the comments below, and any other hidden video game character appearances that you can think of. Make sure you like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. I've been Cy for WhatCulture, and have a good week.